The vote most construed anti-dry. When Jim Hill's railroad charged across the Cascade Mountains more than a century ago, it opened up a show to keep the sounding waves that early pioneers had been dreaming of for decades. It also gave boisterous life to scores of places along its route, small towns that owed their turbulent, sometimes brief existence to the advent of Hill's Great Northern Railway. Encircled by rich silver claims and located smack on the GN line, the little town site of Sultan enjoyed an especially felicitous location at the confluence of the Skykomish and Sultan rivers in the foothills of the Cascade Range. According to a contemporary observer, one could find an immense body of the finest timber in the world and an enormous, perhaps inexhaustible deposit of mineral wealth, a mere stone's throw from Sultan. Oddly enough, the namesake of the town and river was not some Turkish potentate, but instead an early Native American resident whose subtle moniker, Sultan, was streamlined into a form a bit more amenable to the English-speaking tongue. Actually, the tribe's name for the river was Tubadia, which meant steelhead stream, referring to the fish that thronged there in season.
In 1891, Sultan became a base and supply station for the Great Northern's track lane crews, many of whom lodged in crude shanty towns on the outskirts of the town site. Working for the Federal Writers Project half a century later, Everett scribe Edward Fox portrayed early Sultan as a rough mining town where six-shooters sometimes blazed death in the streets. Forests surrounded the settlement, so dense, some have claimed, that lamps were lighted at 3 o'clock each afternoon. In the fall of 1892, as the Great Northern Line was completed through to Sultan, the town's permanent population of 300 or 400 suddenly swelled to something in excess of 1,000 people. That was good news indeed for the community's two hostelries. The Taylor Hotel, run by a brother and sister team, was pretty much a homey, family-style establishment. A bit more hard-edged was the Pioneer Hotel on Main Street at 3rd. Located right in the middle of the town site, it was described by an enthusiastic blurb in the Snohomish Sun as a very popular resort. The woodsman, worn out and fatigued by his day's work, can repose in perfect quietude. The miner, on his tramp to the mines, can have his palate tickled. The steady boarder can enjoy himself with the intelligent men that he will meet there. Ed Guthrie, co-owner and bartender at the Pioneer, must have smiled at the rosy rhetoric. Though the railroad arguably brought a better class of scoundrel into Snohomish County, the little towns that popped up beside the steel rails were home to some pretty scruffy individuals. The sort of folks who perched on the brass rail in front of Guthrie were rarely seekers of perfect quietude, nor was intelligence always a salient characteristic. Take Richard Reagan, for example. A Canadian-born bachelor in his 40s, Reagan worked a stump ranch up the Skykomish River not far from Sultan. For much of his ill-fated career, Dick Reagan appears to have been an altogether undistinguished, if thoroughly unpleasant man who was failing to weather midlife crisis gracefully. It seems evident that Mr. Reagan was an unstable sort. Consider, if you will, his botched attempt to blow up a schoolroom full of children. Reagan owned the old Stitt place, including a house which was much larger than he needed. With no other serviceable structure immediately available, rural school district officials entered into an arrangement with Reagan to use the vacant building as a schoolhouse. Temporarily bewitched by the prospect of enhanced cash flow, Reagan apparently forgot that youngsters can be quite noisy. In short order, the din pushed him over the edge. Fortified with strong drink, he filled the wood stove in the schoolroom with blasting powder. Though the ensuing explosion did nothing more than scorch the cowlick of a little boy named Pat Cannon, Dick Reagan's reputation as a crank was well and truly launched. This reckless attack on children and his own property made him appear simultaneously despicable and ridiculous. While public contempt may have undermined Dick Reagan's initial efforts to build a reputation as a truly bad man, it also seems to have aggravated his mean streak and his thirst. The feckless Reagan had a problem with strong drink, which, when combined with his penchant for knives, hinted at potential trouble. He invariably toted a spring-loaded dirk somewhere on his person. This weapon was the Victorian predecessor of the switchblade, which was to be so warmly embraced by teenage gangs half a century later. Burdened with surpluses of anger, testosterone, and cutlery, Dick Reagan was almost certainly going to cause someone a lot of grief sooner or later. While the interests of law-abiding society are probably well served when the Dick Reagans of this world are denied access to alcohol, Such deprivation does not guarantee rational behavior, as history was to dramatically demonstrate on Election Day, November 8, 1892.
Now well beyond the range of living memory, that fateful election means little to us today. At the time, the talk was of a hotly contested presidential race between unpopular Republican incumbent Benjamin Harrison and Democratic challenger Grover Cleveland. As in the presidential election just a century later, the Democrats prevailed in their attempt to unseat the president. But locally, at least, those events of broad political significance were nearly upstaged by Dick Reagan, his thirst, and his temper. On Election Day, Reagan and a companion named George Hines made their way into Sultan and headed for the bar of the Pioneer Hotel. They were turned away by Ed Guthrie, who gruffly explained that the saloon was closed, that it was illegal to sell liquor on Election Day. Though a passionate exchange of colorful language followed, Guthrie prevailed, and the disgruntled duo departed. But as night fell, Reagan and Hines returned. The hiatus had given Dick Reagan a chance to put an especially keen edge on his knife, and both men had obviously found themselves another source of liquor. They were both very drunk. Weapon in hand, Reagan loitered in front of the hotel, peering into the closed saloon until a thoroughly irritated Guthrie came out to chase the pair away. He pushed Hines into the street and was about to deal with Reagan. Reagan knifed Guthrie twice. Guthrie may well have walked directly into the blade that Reagan thrust at him, and then been slashed on the back of his left arm as he tried to get away. Or he may have been slashed across the arm from behind, and then turned to receive the fatal stab wound, which entered the upper abdomen just below the sternum. Either way, Ed Guthrie staggered back into the hotel and fell to the floor. He died half an hour later without regaining consciousness. Reagan wandered off in the general direction of the Great Northern Saloon, but was soon arrested by Deputy Sheriff Bill Conway. The prisoner's version of the incident had Guthrie chasing the hapless Hines across the street, then attempting to strike Reagan, who just happened to be whittling a stick at the time, and defended himself with a small pocket knife, a weapon which had somehow disappeared by the time of the arrest. Dick Reagan's version of the incident was inconsistent and simply failed to ring true. A contingent of 4 citizens, including a cook named Crawford and David McRae from the local livery stable, headed down to Snohomish on a rail handcar to retrieve a coffin for Guthrie's body. This group broke the news of the killing to the outside world. A couple of days later, the Snohomish Eye described the Election Day tragedy, referring to Reagan as a quarrelsome rancher. Held in the impressive Superior Courtroom of the new Snohomish Courthouse, Reagan's trial got off to a slow start when, owing to the notoriety of the case, jury selection proved difficult. But once underway, the case was tried in just 4 days. Defense attorneys James Hamilton Lewis and Walter P. Bell tried to argue that Guthrie had aggressively pursued Reagan after he left the hotel porch, jumping onto Reagan's back and pounding the man's head with his fists. Reagan insisted he had been innocently whittling on a stick at the time and struck backwards at his attacker, forgetting that he was holding a knife in his hand. Though the only witness, a 10-year-old son of the man who ran the Pioneer Hotel restaurant, testified that Guthrie struck first, Assistant Prosecutor George Allen demonstrated that the fatal injury resulted from a straight thrust which couldn't possibly have been inflicted in the way that Reagan described it. And then, of course, the accused had tried unsuccessfully to get rid of the weapon. The prosecution also argued that the recently honed blade showed premeditation, but the jurors appeared to be skeptical of that allegation. Judge John C. Denny's instructions to the juror offered little hope for the client of his former law partner, Walter Bell. The case went to the jury on December 17, 1892, and after about 6 hours of deliberation, the defendant was found guilty of manslaughter. Judge Denny denied a motion for a new trial and sentenced Reagan to 10 years at hard labor. The Snohomish Press noted that during a stay at the county jail, the defendant had been quarrelsome and uncivil.
Thus was Dick Reagan finally acknowledged by his peers to be a truly bad man, a killer, a man so dangerous he had to be sent away in shackles to toil in durance vile. Nonetheless, when Reagan returned from Walla Walla in September of 1899, having served nearly 7 years of his 10-year sentence, He was greeted by a newspaper item saying that bygones should be forgotten. Apparently already forgotten were Reagan's remarks upon his departure for penitentiary when, quarrelsome and uncivil in the extreme, he had reportedly sworn he would have vengeance upon the judge and the jury. It's a hell of a country, he had stated with disgust, where a man is not allowed to defend his life. Perhaps what he really meant was that it's a hell of a country where the business of electing politicians fouls up a man's opportunity to warm his innards with a portion of the cup that cheers.
That was David Dilgard of the Everett Public Library. This is a production of the Everett Public Library. Check for other EPL podcasts at www.epls.org/podcast. Thanks for listening.
The music of your life. KWJZ, community proud.
This portion of KWJZ programming has been brought to you by Tuxedo's Antique Mall. Tuxedo's Antique Mall on Main Street in downtown Duval is more than just antiques. Tuxedo's Antique Mall has over 40 vendor booths featuring antiques, collectibles, toys, CDs, DVDs, electronics, and more. Tuxedo's is open from 10 a.m. until 6 p.m. Monday through Friday and 11 a.m. until 6 p.m. on Sundays. Tuxedo's Antique Mall can be reached at 425-788-9678. That's 425-788-9678. KWJZ appreciates the sponsorship support from Tuxedo's Antique Mall. Our forecast brought to you by Bob Carver in Snohomish. Experience a lifetime of music enjoyment. BobCarverCorp.com. A cloudy one on this Tuesday here in the Snohomish Valley, 45 for a high. We'll be right at the freezing mark tonight at 32. We'll get a look at the sun tomorrow and temperature about the same, 46. Looking at 48 degrees on Thursday, partly sunny, and some rain moving in for Friday and the first part of the weekend. I'm Dane Scott, and we're hometown proud, KWJZ.